The sun had slipped behind the hills, leaving the land painted in shades of orange and purple. Samuel Carter stood outside his barn, leaning on his pitchfork and listening to the steady sound of the wind. Life on the edge of the Wild West was quiet most days, though not without its troubles. The ranch kept him busy, the cattle needed care, and the horses demanded constant attention. Still, Samuel had grown used to the routine. It kept his mind calm after years of wandering. That evening, he had just finished feeding his animals and was about to head inside when he heard something. It was faint at first, just a shuffle, like hay shifting in the dark. His first thought was that one of the horses had kicked the stall, but then he realized the sound came from deeper inside the barn. He frowned. Coyotes had been prowling near his land lately, and he could not afford to lose a calf or have trouble stirred up in the night. Samuel lit his lantern and stepped into the barn. The flickering light pushed the shadows back, but not enough to calm his nerves. The air inside felt tense, heavier than usual, as if the building itself held its breath. He moved slowly, his boots crunching softly on the straw. The horses shifted nervously in their stalls, and one of them gave a sharp snort, ears flicking toward the corner. That was when he saw movement, quick, small, and human. "Who's there?" Samuel demanded, his voice steady but firm. He raised the lantern higher, its glow sweeping over the hay bales. For a moment, nothing moved. Then a figure shifted, crouched low among the straw. It was a woman. She looked young, no more than her early 20s, but her face was drawn with exhaustion. Her clothes were worn and torn from travel, dust clinging to the edges of her dress and the soft leather around her shoulders. Her dark eyes glared at him, full of both fear and defiance. And then Samuel saw it, the streak of blood running down her arm. She had been hurt. "Stay back," she said in a low, tired voice. "I don't want trouble." Samuel stared at her, his mind racing. He knew her face, though he had never met her before. Her description had been carried by every mouth in town for weeks. She was the Apache woman everyone was talking about. Some claimed she had robbed a store. Others swore she had led raids on settlers. Posters in town called her dangerous, a wanted fugitive. And now here she was, bleeding in his barn. He could have shouted. He could have run to the sheriff or saddled his horse to bring the bounty hunters down on her. The reward would have been more money than he had seen in a long time. But as Samuel looked at her, at the blood staining her sleeve, at the way her chest rose and fell quickly with fear, he felt something else rise in him. Compassion. "You're hurt," he said softly, lowering the pitchfork. "You won't last long if you keep moving like that." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Why do you care?" "You don't know me." "That's true," Samuel admitted, setting the lantern on a beam. "But I know what it looks like when someone's running for their life. And I know you're tired enough to collapse right here in the hay." Her lips pressed together as if she wanted to argue, but the weight of exhaustion seemed to pull the fight from her. Slowly, she leaned back against the straw, her body sagging. Samuel walked closer, careful not to startle her. He noticed she held a small knife in her hand, though her grip was weak. "I'm not here to turn you in," Samuel said quietly. "But if you want to stay hidden, you'll need that wound cleaned. Infection will do worse than bounty hunters." She studied him for a long moment, then finally let the knife fall beside her. He took it as a sign of trust, small though it was. Without another word, Samuel left the barn and came back with a bucket of water, a rag, and a small jar of salve his mother had once taught him to make. Kneeling beside her, he gently pulled back the torn sleeve. The gash on her arm wasn't deep, but it was ragged, as if she had brushed against rocks while running. "What's your name?" he asked as he worked. The woman hesitated before answering. Naya, Samuel repeated. "I'm Samuel Carter. You don't have to tell me what happened. But if you're in my barn, I can at least make sure you don't die in it." The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile, though it faded quickly. She let him clean the wound, flinching when the cold water touched her skin. His hands were rough from years of work, but careful, steady. When he finished tying the rag around her arm, he sat back and looked at her again. "You can rest here tonight," he told her. "The barn's warm enough and the horses won't mind company. I'll bring some food." "Why?" she asked sharply, her eyes flashing again. "Why help me? If the sheriff finds out, you'll lose everything. They'll call you a traitor." Samuel shrugged. "Maybe. But I'd rather answer to my own conscience than to a man in town who's never lifted a finger to help me. You need a chance to breathe, Naya, that's all." For the first time, her eyes softened, though suspicion still lingered. "You're either very kind," she said slowly, "or very foolish." "Maybe both," Samuel replied with a faint grin. He left her with a blanket and returned later with bread and a small piece of dried meat. She ate cautiously as though expecting him to trick her, but hunger soon overcame doubt. Samuel sat nearby, leaning against the wooden wall, listening to the storm outside. The rain drummed on the roof, steady and sure, sealing them inside together. Hours passed and the barn grew quiet except for the occasional stomp of a horse's hoof. Samuel closed his eyes, though he didn't sleep deeply. When he opened them again, Naya was watching him. "You're not afraid of me?" she asked in the darkness. Samuel shook his head. "No. I don't think you're what they say you are." Naya's gaze held his, steady and unblinking. Then she pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and turned away, as if hiding something. Samuel did not press her. He knew trust took time, especially when the whole world seemed to call someone an enemy. As the night wore on, Samuel realized something had shifted in his life. He had gone to the barn expecting to chase off a thief or mend a broken gate. Instead, he had found a woman hunted by the world, with eyes that carried both pain and strength. She was a stranger, and yet her presence filled the barn with a strange kind of energy, as though the storm outside had moved into his heart. He lay back in the straw, listening to her breathing soften as she finally gave in to sleep. Tomorrow would bring questions. Tomorrow might bring danger, but for that night Samuel made his choice. He would protect her, whatever the cost, and with that decision his quiet rancher's life was no longer the same. The storm faded by morning, leaving the land washed clean and the air sharp with the smell of wet earth. Samuel woke early as he always did, but this time he moved quietly. He was not alone in his barn anymore. When he glanced at the corner, Naya was still there, wrapped in the blanket, her breathing steady in sleep. For a moment, Samuel almost believed it had been a dream, but then she stirred, opened her eyes, and looked at him with the same guarded strength she had shown the night before. "You're still here," Samuel said softly. "Where else could I go?" Naya replied, her voice rough from fatigue. Samuel nodded as if that explained everything. He brought her some water and a small bowl of oats he had cooked earlier. She ate slowly, eyes flicking toward the open barn doors as though she feared every shadow might hide a pursuer. When she finished, Samuel leaned back on a wooden beam. "Naya," he said carefully, "I know the posters in town. They say you're wanted, but I saw you last night. You're not what they say you are. Tell me the truth. What really happened?" For a long time she said nothing. Her dark eyes searched his face as if weighing his honesty against the danger of trust. Finally she sighed and pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "They say I stole from the trading post," she began. "They say I led an attack that killed men. None of it is true. I was there, yes, but not as they tell it. I tried to stop the fight. I tried to keep peace. But they needed someone to blame, and it was easier to point to me than to admit their own men started it." Samuel listened without interrupting. Her words were simple, but her tone carried weight like a river-cutting stone. He believed her, though he knew others would not. "Now," she continued, her voice low, "bounty hunters ride with my name on their lips. The sheriff calls me dangerous, though I have harmed no one. If I am caught, they will not wait for trial. They will make an example of me." Silence filled the barn. Samuel rubbed his rough hands together, thinking. He had heard stories like hers before, of voices silenced, of truths buried under fear and profit. He looked at Naya, at the way she sat proud even while wounded, and he felt a stirring of admiration. "You have nothing to fear from me," Samuel said finally, "but you can't stay hidden here forever. The sheriff and his men search farms every week now. They'll come here sooner or later." Naya's eyes sharpened. "And when they come, will you hand me over?" Samuel shook his head. "No, I'll tell them nothing. I'll send them away." Her gaze softened slightly, though mistrust lingered like a shadow. Then, to his surprise, she leaned forward. "You could protect me, Samuel. Not just for a night. For longer." "What do you mean?" he asked. Her words came steady, as if she had thought of this before. "If I am your wife, no one will question me being here. A husband has the right to guard his home, to guard his family. With you, I could find safety. Alone, I will always be hunted." The word struck Samuel like a hammer. Marriage to a woman he had just met? He opened his mouth to protest, but found none came. He stared at her, trying to understand. She was not begging. She was not even asking. She was stating a path she believed could save her life. "Naya," he said slowly, "I don't even know you." "Then know me," she answered, her voice calm but sure. "I will not lie to you. I will not betray you. But if I walk out of this barn alone, I will be caught before the week ends. You know this as well as I do." Samuel stood restless, pacing across the wooden floor. He had always lived alone, never bound to anyone but his land and his animals. The thought of tying his life to hers, a woman with danger at her heels, felt heavy. Yet as he looked at her, he also felt something else, a sense of responsibility. Perhaps even something deeper, a pull he could not explain. Before he could answer, a sound carried on the wind, hooves, multiple horses. Samuel's heart leapt. He snatched the lantern, doused its flame, and turned to Naya. "Stay here. Don't move." He stepped outside, closing the barn door behind him. The morning light revealed 3 riders approaching along the dirt road. Their wide-brimmed hats and long coats marked them as bounty hunters. Samuel tightened his jaw and walked to meet them at the fence line. "Morning," one of the men called, his voice rough. "Name's Briggs. You seen anything unusual? We're looking for an Apache woman. Dangerous sort. Word is she came this way last night." Samuel kept his face steady. "I've been here same as always. Storm kept me busy with the animals. Haven't seen anyone." Briggs studied him, eyes sharp. "Mind if we take a look in your barn?" Samuel's chest tightened, but he shook his head calmly. "I do mind. My barn's my business. You want to search, you bring a sheriff's paper. Otherwise I say no." The bounty hunters exchanged looks. One muttered under his breath, but Briggs raised a hand. "Easy, boys. We'll come back if we need to. Keep your eyes open, Carter. She's worth good money." With that, they turned their horses and rode off, dust rising behind them. Samuel stood still until they were gone, then let out the breath he had been holding. His hands trembled slightly, though he kept them clenched. When he returned to the barn, Naya was standing eyes wide. She had clearly heard every word. "You lied for me," she whispered. Samuel nodded. Seemed the right thing to do. For the first time she smiled. Small, fleeting, but real. "Maybe you are foolish," she said softly. "But I think you are also brave." Samuel chuckled, though his heart was still pounding. He sat back down on a hay bale, wiping sweat from his brow. Naya moved closer, her steps cautious but certain. "Do you see now?" she asked. "Alone I cannot fight them all. But with you I can have a chance. You don't have to answer me now, Samuel. But think about it. A husband and wife can stand stronger than one fugitive and one farmer hiding secrets." Her words echoed in his mind long after she finished. Samuel knew the danger had just begun. By choosing to protect her, he had already taken a side. Now, whether he admitted it or not, his life was tied to hers. That night, as he lay awake listening to the wind rattle the roof, Samuel thought of her eyes, sharp, determined, unyielding. He thought of the bounty hunters, of the lies he had told, and of the risk that grew heavier with each passing hour. And though fear pressed at him, so did something else, a strange warmth, a pull toward the woman sleeping only a few feet away. He closed his eyes, knowing that tomorrow would bring more questions. But in his heart, he had already made one decision. He would not abandon her. Not now, not ever. The next morning broke with a sky the color of pale gold. Samuel stepped outside to fetch water from the well, his mind heavy with thoughts. He could hear the soft sounds of Naya moving inside the barn, feeding the horses as if she had always belonged there. The strange part was how natural it already felt, her presence in his quiet world. Yet he knew her being there was like a flame hidden in dry grass. At any moment, one spark could turn it all into a fire. When Samuel returned with the bucket, Naya looked up. Her dark hair was loose, falling around her shoulders, and her face carried the strength of someone who had lived through storms far greater than last night's. "You didn't have to feed them," Samuel said, setting the bucket down. "I wanted to," she replied simply. "I know animals. They do not judge. They only respond to kindness." Samuel smiled faintly. "That's true enough." As they worked side by side, Samuel noticed how quickly they had fallen into rhythm. She moved with quiet confidence, though he could see the stiffness in her wounded arm. He offered to help, but she shook her head. "If I cannot do small things, then I am already lost," she said. Later that day, while mending a fence, Samuel caught himself thinking of her words from the night before. "If I am your wife, no one will question me being here." The idea still felt heavy, but it no longer seemed impossible. He knew the bounty hunters would not give up. Protecting her as a stranger was dangerous, but protecting her as a wife, that gave him a shield. Still, his mind wrestled with doubt. Was he willing to tie his life to hers when the whole frontier seemed set against her? By afternoon, Samuel rode into town for supplies. The general store buzzed with talk of the search. A group of men stood by the door, their voices sharp with rumor. "They say Briggs nearly had her yesterday," one man said. "Someone's hiding her. Won't be long before they find out who." "Sheriff says she's dangerous as a rattlesnake," another added. "If you ask me, anyone who helps her ought to swing right alongside." Samuel kept his head down as he bought flour, salt, and some medicine. He forced himself to appear calm, though his stomach nodded at every word. On the way out, the sheriff himself stopped him. "Morning, Carter," the sheriff drawled, his eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. "You see anything unusual out your way?" Samuel met his gaze evenly. "Just the storm. Kept me busy with the animals." The sheriff studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. "Well, you let me know if that changes. Don't make the mistake of thinking kindness will keep you safe. That woman's worth more trouble than you can imagine." Samuel tipped his hat and walked away, the weight of the sheriff's warning pressing on him all the way back to the ranch. When he reached the barn, Naya was waiting, her expression tense. "You went to town," she said. "Had to," Samuel replied. "We need supplies." "And what did you hear?" she asked. "Enough," Samuel answered quietly. "They're watching everyone. It won't be long before someone points them here." Naya looked down, her fingers curling into fists. "Then you must let me go." "If I stay, I'll bring ruin to you." Samuel stepped closer, his voice firm. "I told you before, I won't turn you away. We'll find another way." Her eyes lifted to his, searching. "Another way," she repeated softly. Then she took a breath. "Samuel, I must ask again. If I am your wife, I can stand beside you without fear of being dragged away. They may not like me, but they will not have the right to tear me from your side." Samuel's heart pounded. He looked at her, at the strength and determination in her gaze. She was not pleading. She was offering him a choice, to stand with her or to let her go into the darkness alone. "I don't know if I'm ready for such a thing," Samuel admitted. "Marriage? It's more than a shield. It's a bond, and I do not take bonds lightly," Naya replied. "If I ask it of you, it is not only for safety. I would honor you as husband, but I will not force you." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Samuel could not answer then. Instead, he walked outside, letting the cool wind clear his thoughts. That evening, as the sun dipped low, the sound of hooves came again. This time it was the sheriff with 2 deputies. Samuel met them at the gate, his heart steady, though his palms were damp. "Evening, Carter," the sheriff said. "We're checking barns and sheds today. That woman's close. Might even be hiding in plain sight." Samuel felt heat rise in his chest. "I told you, Sheriff. Haven't seen her." "We'll take a look anyway," the sheriff replied, swinging down from his horse. Before Samuel could stop him, the deputies strode toward the barn. His pulse thundered. Inside, Naya must be listening, ready to run, ready to fight. Samuel moved quickly, stepping in front of the door. "You've no right to search my property without paper," Samuel said firmly. "This is my land. You want to poke around, you bring the law proper, not just your boots." The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You seem awful protective, Carter. You hiding something?" Samuel held his ground. "I'm protecting my rights. That's all." For a long, tense moment, the sheriff studied him. Then with a smirk, he tipped his hat. "Fine, but if we find out you've been lying, you'll regret it." The men mounted their horses and rode off, dust rising behind them. Samuel stood until they vanished, his breath coming slow and hard. When he turned back, Naya was there in the doorway, her face pale but steady. "You risked everything," she said. Samuel shook his head. "I risked what I was willing to risk." Naya stepped closer, her eyes bright in the fading light. "And now you see, Samuel, they will not stop. If you are alone, they will break you. If we stand together, maybe we can survive. But we cannot walk halfway. You must choose." Samuel looked at her, really looked, at the courage that burned in her gaze, at the strength that carried her even while hunted, at the strange pull he felt every time she spoke. Something inside him shifted then, something he could no longer deny. He reached out, gently touching her wounded arm. "If I take this step, Naya, it's not just to keep you safe. It's because I want to." Her breath caught, and for the first time since she had entered his barn, her eyes softened fully, without guard or suspicion. "Then when the time comes," she whispered, "say yes." That night, as the stars stretched across the endless Wild West sky, Samuel lay awake on the hay, listening to the steady sound of Naya's breathing. His heart was no longer restless with doubt. It was restless with something else, something stronger. He had not spoken the word yet, but deep inside he knew the answer he would give. He would not let her go. The nights grew colder as autumn winds swept across the plains. Samuel lay awake in the barn, listening to the restless stir of the horses. His thoughts churned like the leaves outside. He had chosen not to betray Naya, and with every passing day that choice tied their lives more tightly together. Yet danger pressed closer too. The bounty hunters had not left the area. Farmers whispered of riders seen at dusk, lanterns glowing on the ridges, shadows watching from the hills. The sheriff visited every homestead asking sharp questions. Samuel knew it was only a matter of time before suspicion fell hard upon him. One evening, as Samuel stacked hay, Naya stood beside him, her face calm, but her eyes carrying fire. "They are coming again," she said. Samuel turned. "How do you know?" "I feel it," she answered simply. "When the land grows too quiet, the storm is near." He wanted to laugh at her certainty, but the truth was he felt it too. Something heavy pressed in the air like thunder waiting to break. That night, long after the sun fell, Samuel heard the distant sound of hooves. He rose quickly, lantern in hand, and went to the barn. Naya was already awake, crouched near the door with her knife ready. Her eyes met his, steady and unafraid. "They will not let you be," she said. "If I go now, they may leave you." "No," Samuel said firmly. "If you go, they'll take you, and I won't stand by while that happens." He began to move around the barn, checking tools and supplies. His father had taught him long ago that a man without a rifle could still make use of clever hands. He tightened ropes, shifted boards, and set small traps near the doors. The old barn with its beams and shadows became his fortress. Naya watched him quietly, then stepped forward. "You stand with me," she said softly. Samuel glanced at her. "I told you before. I won't let you face them alone." Outside, the sound of hooves grew louder. The bounty hunters had come, their voices carrying through the night air. Samuel blew out the lantern, plunging the barn into darkness except for the silver wash of moonlight through the cracks. Briggs, the leader, called out, "Carter, we know she's here. You've been lying to us. Hand her over and we'll walk away. Otherwise you'll pay her price yourself." Samuel's voice rang strong. "There's no one here for you." "Turn back," laughter echoed outside. "Brave words for a farmer," another hunter jeered. Naya's hand brushed Samuel's arm. "They won't leave," she whispered. He nodded. "Then we hold them off." The hunters dismounted, their boots crunching in the dirt. They tried the barn door first, only to find it stuck fast with Samuel's rope and beam. One cursed. Another tried to climb through a side window, but his foot caught a hidden snare Samuel had laid. He tumbled into the dirt with a cry. Shots rang out, bullets striking the wooden walls. The horses inside neighed in fear, kicking their stalls. Samuel pulled Naya down behind a hay bale, shielding her with his arm. Dust fell from the rafters as the wood shook with impact. "They'll burn us out if we stay," Naya said quickly. "Then we move before they think of it," Samuel replied. He led her toward the back, where a small door opened into the corral. But the hunters were already circling. Samuel grabbed a pitchfork, thrusting it toward the first shadow that lunged at them. The man stumbled back with a shout. Naya, quick and silent, swung a wooden beam she had lifted from the floor. Together they pushed through. The night erupted into chaos. The hunters cursed, shouting orders, their boots pounding the dirt. Samuel pulled Naya toward the edge of the fields, where the tall grass rose high enough to hide them. They dropped low, crawling through the stalks as moonlight flickered overhead. Behind them, the barn loomed like a ghost, the hunters circling it in frustration. Briggs barked orders. "Find them."
"Spread out."
Samuel's breath came hard, but he forced himself forward. Every sound seemed too loud, every movement too slow. Naya moved like a shadow, her steps sure, her eyes sharp. At one point, a hunter passed so close Samuel could see the glint of his pistol. He held still, heart pounding until the man moved on. Finally, they reached the line of cottonwoods near the creek. Samuel pulled Naya into the shadows of the trees. The water whispered softly over the rocks, masking their breath. "We can't go back," Naya said quietly. Samuel shook his head. "If we do, they'll wait for us. The ranch is no longer safe." She looked at him, her face pale in the moonlight but her gaze steady. "Then we are both fugitives now." The weight of her words settled heavy on him, yet strangely he felt no regret. He had made his choice the moment he stood between her and the sheriff. There was no turning back. They followed the creek, keeping low, moving deeper into the wilderness. Samuel thought of his land, his barn, his animals, all left behind. The life he had built alone was gone in one night. But when he looked at Naya beside him, he knew he had chosen something more powerful than land or peace. Hours passed before they stopped to rest in a hollow beneath the trees. The moon had dipped low and dawn was not far off. Samuel sank onto a fallen log, his body aching from the chase. Naya sat beside him, her hair damp with dew, her face drawn but resolute. "You could have handed me over," she said softly. "You could have saved your farm." Samuel shook his head. "What good is land if I have to betray myself to keep it?" For a moment silence hung between them, filled only by the rustle of leaves. Then Naya reached out, her hand brushing his. "You chose me," she whispered. He looked at her, meeting her gaze. "I did." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of all he had given up. And for the first time, Samuel felt the bond between them shift from necessity to something deeper. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in pale fire, Samuel and Naya rose together. Their old lives had ended in the shadows of the barn. What lay ahead was unknown, full of danger and uncertainty. But they would face it side by side. For Samuel, there was no longer a question. He had chosen his path. He had chosen her. The first rays of the morning sun spilled across the land, painting the sky with soft pinks and golds. Samuel and Naya walked slowly along the creek, their boots damp from the dew-soaked grass. Both were tired, their bodies heavy from a night of running, but neither spoke of stopping. The world behind them had turned dangerous and the world ahead uncertain, but they shared the same steady step. After some time, Samuel found a quiet place where the trees leaned close, offering shade and cover. They rested there, sitting on a fallen log. Naya closed her eyes briefly, listening to the song of birds hidden in the branches. Samuel studied her in the soft light, noticing the strength in her features, the calm in her breathing, the way she held herself as though she refused to bow to fear. "You're not afraid," he said at last. Her eyes opened, dark and steady. "Fear walks with me, Samuel, but it does not control me. I learned long ago that if you let fear guide your steps, you will never move forward." He nodded, letting her words sink in. Then, after a long silence, he asked, "Where will you go now?" Naya looked at him with a faint smile. "I thought you had already answered that. Wherever you go, I go." The simplicity of her words struck him harder than a storm. She was no longer just a stranger hiding in his barn. She was part of his path, part of his life. Samuel felt the weight of the choice he had made, but along with it, a warmth spread through him, a sense of purpose he had not known in years. The day passed slowly as they followed the creek deeper into the land. They avoided roads and open fields, keeping to the trees and the ridges. Samuel knew the hunters would search behind them, but soon word would spread further, and they would have to move beyond the reach of those who wanted Naya captured. By evening, they found a small clearing where the grass was tall and the sky stretched wide above. Samuel gathered wood and Naya struck flint to spark a small fire. The flames danced between them, chasing away the chill. For the first time in many days, Samuel allowed himself to relax, if only a little. Naya sat across from him, her face glowing in the firelight. She held her hands near the warmth, silent for a long time. Then she lifted her gaze. "Samuel," she said softly, "you have given up everything for me. Your farm, your peace, your name in town, why?" He took a deep breath, staring into the flames. "At first, I thought it was just the right thing to do. A man should not let another suffer if he can help. But the truth is, Naya, it's more than that now. I don't see you as a burden. I don't see you as trouble. I see you as someone I cannot walk away from. Maybe I'm a fool, but I don't care. My life is with you now." Her eyes glistened in the firelight. She reached across, placing her hand over his. "Then let us not hide from it anymore. You said once that marriage is a bond, not just a shield. You were right. And I meant it when I said I would honor that bond. Samuel Carter, I choose you, not out of fear, but out of my heart." The night seemed to hold its breath. Samuel's hand tightened around hers. For a moment, words failed him. Then slowly he said, "Then I choose you too, not because the world demands it, but because I want no other path." The two sat together, hands joined, the firelight flickering on their faces. It was not a wedding with fine clothes, a preacher, or witnesses. It was simpler, truer, a promise spoken beneath the endless Wild West sky with only the stars as their witness. In that moment, Samuel and Naya were no longer two people running from danger. They were husband and wife, bound not by law but by choice. As the fire burned low, Naya leaned her head against his shoulder. "The road ahead will not be easy," she murmured. Samuel smiled faintly. "Nothing worth keeping ever is." The following days tested them. They traveled through canyons and across plains, sharing what little food they had, sleeping beneath the open sky. At times, Samuel's heart ached for his farm, the barn, the animals left behind. But whenever he looked at Naya walking beside him, her steps strong, her eyes bright with determination, he felt no regret. One morning, they reached a ridge that overlooked a distant valley. From there, Samuel could see smoke rising from chimneys, the faint outline of a small town nestled among the hills. "That's where we'll go," he said. Naya studied the town from afar. "Will they accept us?" "They don't know us," Samuel replied. "We'll be just another couple looking for a new start. We'll work, we'll build, and we'll keep to ourselves. In time, we'll make a life there." For the first time since she had entered his barn, Naya's expression fully softened. "A new life," she repeated, as though testing the words. Then she smiled, small but real. Yes, together. The walk to the valley took 2 more days. Along the way, they shared stories. Samuel speaking of his childhood on the ranch, Naya telling of her people, their songs and traditions, their struggles to survive as the frontier closed around them. Each story drew them closer, weaving their pasts into something shared. When they finally reached the town, no one questioned them. To the eyes of strangers, they were only a man and his wife arriving with travel in their eyes and hope in their hearts. Samuel found work quickly, offering his strength to mend fences and tend fields. Naya used her skills with herbs to help heal small wounds and sicknesses among the families who lived nearby. Though whispers followed them at first, their quiet honesty won over suspicion. At night, when the work was done, Samuel and Naya would sit outside their small cabin, looking up at the stars. The memories of the chase, the hunters, and the barn seemed far away then, like a different life. One evening, as they watched the sky, Samuel spoke quietly. "Do you ever think about what might have been? If you hadn't come to my barn that night?" Naya turned to him, her eyes shining in the starlight. "I would not be alive, and you would still be alone. Perhaps that was fate's way of bringing us together." He reached for her hand, and she placed hers in his without hesitation. "Then I thank fate," Samuel said with a smile. In the silence that followed, the sounds of crickets filled the night, and the world seemed at peace. Their journey had begun with fear and danger, but it ended with something stronger, hope. A rancher who once lived alone and a woman once hunted by the world had found each other. Together, they had turned their darkest night into the beginning of a new dawn, and so, beneath the wide and endless Wild West sky, Samuel Carter and Naya walked forward, not as fugitives but as husband and wife, bound by love, courage, and the promise of a life they would build together.